Thank you for joining, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining this joint press conference between Génération Future, who is the leading NGO in France working on pesticides, biocides, and other chemical pollutions, and the Pesticide Action Network Europe. We will discuss today the Commission leaked proposal on the Food and Feed Omnibus regulation proposal, with a special focus on pesticides and biocides. My name is Martin Dermine. I'm the Executive Director of Pan Europe. Two housekeeping rules. Please maintain your camera and microphone closed. And also the presentation of the press conference will be recorded, but not the Q&As. We will first present our analysis of the proposal, followed by a Q&A session with two breakout rooms, one in English and one in French. Next slide, please. Thank you, Salome. So as an introduction, we had the publication of the Vision for Food and Agriculture that provided some positive messages. With one of them is more biocontrol. And indeed, we've seen over the last years that biocontrol helped reducing the use of synthetic pesticides in organic production, but also in conventional farming as part of integrated pest management. And also in the proposal, the Commission announced a reduction of maximum residue levels of pesticides that are banned in Europe, but used elsewhere in the world, and that we find in imported food, which we also found a positive proposal. But we were very dismayed that the leaked omnibus proposal shows that actually these positive evolutions, biocontrol, lowering of MRLs seem to be, in our view, a Trojan horse to deregulate all pesticides, and in particular synthetic pesticides, the most toxic ones. This is in complete contradiction with the demands of citizens since many, many years, with European citizens' initiatives, messages from the conclusions of the von der Leyen Conference for the Future of Europe. Everywhere in Europe, we regularly have petitions against pesticides and so on. It's an enormous gift to the pesticide industry. The scrutiny of the toxicity of pesticides represents a cost for the industry that the Commission is proposing to suppress. We see it as a 30-year regression in EU pesticide safety. Over the last years, there was gradually an increase in pesticide safety, which is positive, and we have to be proud of this in Europe. And this proposal is an immense regression. So in terms of policy calendar, in theory, this proposal is meant to be discussed and voted tomorrow in the College of Commissioners and presented on the 16th of December. It's a theoretical timeline, but this is what has been announced. Now I will give the floor to my colleague, Salome Rouanel, policy officer, who carried out the analysis of the leaked document and will present you not all the issues with this proposal, but the main ones. Salome, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. Hello, everyone. I hope you can understand me well because I have a strong cold today. So indeed, I will refer to the leaked proposal that was published on the 21st of November, which is already more than 2 weeks ago, but is still still the most reliable information we have today about the draft. And I will go through 4 points which are of particular concern to us today, but again, it's not an exhaustive presentation here. We will publish at the end of this press conference a briefing which gives a much better overview on all the proposals by the Commission. But here, let's focus on the most unacceptable proposals. And with this, I will start with the proposal by the Commission to grant open-ended approval for most of the active substances that are on the market today. The system in place today provides that substances are first approved for 10 years in the EU and can be renewed up to 15 years. And the proposal will bring a complete shift to this system because it's only substances that would be flagged as candidates for substitution, which means more hazardous pesticides that would go through risk assessment and renewal procedures under this new system. Concretely, this means less than 10% of the substances that are being approved on the market today. And this is highly problematic to us because the renewal procedures is the only time where the industry is automatically required to submit a comprehensive data set on the toxicology, ecotoxicology, and also information about the environment about that substance. And I mean, my colleague will come back to this later, but concretely, many substances that have been banned until today are not candidate for substitution, which show that these categories by far do not capture the most concerning substances. This approval, open-ended approval, comes with an open-ended authorization for the products that would contain these active substances. So it's both a change at the EU level and at the national level. The Commission is also proposing what I assume they consider as a safeguard, which to us is by far very insufficient. They say that by an implementing regulation, so through comitology, they could still, on a basis that we don't really know, when would they could still select a series of substances that could go through renewal. But this would be completely up to them to define the list, to decide on the rapporteur member state, to decide on the deadline for submission of the dossier and also for assessment of the dossier. And there is also a reference to the need to take into account the available resources of member states. So what we fear here is that it's a process that becomes highly political, and that it could be that not so many substances are going through this process. And we don't really know based on what information, once the information tap is closed via open-ended approval. Then comes the point on the use of scientific science. Another worrying proposal by the Commission is to restrict the member state ability to authorize pesticides or reject an authorization based on the latest science. Today, the text is very clear that this latest scientific information have to be taken into account, and this was recently confirmed by a case law that Pan-Europe won. And what the Commission is now proposing is that rather than to take into account this information, the member state should stick to the latest EU assessment. And the reason why it's problematic is because sometimes there are a few years between the approval decision and the authorization decision, and there is new scientific information that are out and that member states could not use. The only thing they could do is to notify this to the Commission and to wait for EU procedures to be undertaken. And to give you a concrete example, under this system, the decision by Denmark to ban some PFAS pesticide products couldn't have taken place. So, because Denmark would have been tied to the decision of the Commission to initiate the procedures at the national level, at the EU level, sorry. And maybe one last important point for us, no, sorry, second last, is the grace period. So today, when the substance is banned in the EU, when there is a decision to ban it, there is a possibility to grant up to 18 months before the substance is completely phased out. And the relation says where the reason for non-renewing the substance are not related to the protection of health or the environment. We know that today this system is already misused. Some substances that are banned because they are found to be harmful are still granted long grace period. We had the case recently of flufenacet. So this PFAS pesticide, also another endocrine disruptor, was granted 18 months. But the Commission wants to go further by extending this grace period to up to 3 years, and is making the rule weaker when it comes to harmful substances, because now it would only be substances of immediate and serious concern for which we would have to ban them immediately. And I mean, this concept of immediate and serious concern is not defined in the regulation, so it makes the process much more political here again. And maybe one last point, or the possibility to derogate to the safety criteria of the regulation. So today in the text, there is already a provision that allows for the approval of a substance that would have been found not to meet the safety criteria for up to 5 years if it is found to be needed to contain a serious danger to plant health that could not be contained by any other means, including non-chemical solutions. Today, that's an article that has never been applied because it has never been demonstrated that there was no alternative for any substances. But the Commission is proposing to broaden the scope to include a reference to plant production, so yield consideration. So here again, for us, it's very problematic because it goes again the purpose of the regulation, which is very clear on the fact that the protection of human health and the environment should always prevail over production considerations. So this really goes against it. The only positive part is that the Commission is also restricting in a way the scope of the substances that could be approved under this system, because it excluded the CMRs, as well as some substances that are problematic to the environment. But still, this opened the door for approval by derogation of substances that would have been found to be too harmful to be authorized in the first place. And with it, I will give the floor to Pauline Servant, who will illustrate a bit what this open-ended approval proposal would mean or would have meant if this had been adopted a couple of years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Salome, and hi, everyone. The proposal of the Commission, in the proposal, there is no impact assessment. No impact assessment was performed by the Commission. So we tried us to estimate the number of substances that have been banned but would still be on the market if the proposal had been in place till 2011. We found that 162 substances were banned since 2011. And among these 162 substances, about 1/3 were identified as candidates for substitution. And this means that the 2/3, 72%, were not candidates for substitution. This is corresponding to 117 substances. Next slide, please. So among these 117 substances that are not identified as candidates of substitution and that were banned, we found that 82 substances, the reason of the ban was that no renewal of application was submitted, or the application was submitted but later withdrawn. And for many of these substances, we can reasonably say that the applicant withdrew its application because they knew that the risk was unacceptable and the substance would not be renewed. So for some examples, there's the 3 neonicotinoids, clothianidine, tametoxam, and imidacloprid, and also the carcinogenic and contaminated groundwater substance, chloridazone. And for 31 substances, they were banned because a risk was identified during the reassessment process. Next slide, please. And among these 31 substances we identified, we found that many of them were very dangerous. 10 were identified as CMR substances during the re-evaluation process. For instance, the chlorpyrifos, bentiavalicarb, etc. 7 were identified as endocrine disruptor, like meteral or moconzeb. 7 present a high risk to human health, and to workers, residents, or consumers, like the neurotoxic phosphate, for example. Many of them present a risk to non-target organisms and are therefore a threat for biodiversity, and 9 substances present a risk to groundwater. So this illustrates very well that many substances are identified dangerous during the re-evaluation process. So this is done for me, and I give the floor to the next for the solution who consider to be implemented.
Thank you, Pauline. Yes, indeed, we were invited last week to have a meeting with the cabinet of Commissioner Dombrovskis, who is in charge of simplification/deregulation. And we explained to them that, well, in their view, what they want to do is to reduce the burden on member states' administrations who have a lot of work with all these pesticides that need to be reevaluated regularly. But we reminded them of the Commission's own fitness check exercise under the refit regulation that concluded that the reason the EU has one of the best regulatory systems in the world, is that there is this periodic reassessment of all pesticide substances with stringent approval criteria, and that it is fit for purpose, and that its implementation still needs to be improved. And the recommendations were that, first of all, to only accept complete and high-quality application dossiers. We see that it is a strategy from the pesticide industry to submit incomplete dossiers to regulatory authorities that then need to go back to the applicant and ask for additional data or clarifications. And this leads to constant delays in the procedures, additional work for member states' public servants. And this is one of the major causes of delays, and also identified by the European Parliament Pest Committee and also by EFSA. The refit recommends also to raise application fees to cover the assessment costs, and to ring-fence this money for the budget of the regulatory authority, which is not sufficiently done in most member states. So most member states do not have enough resources to carry out a timely risk assessment and risk assessment of good quality. The refit also recommends the Commission to initiate infringement procedures against member states that do not meet the legal timelines. And finally, when there is an assessment of an application, the first thing that needs to be done is to check if the substance meets what we call the cutoff criteria, which is carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, toxicity, and endocrine disruption. Because if the substance meets one of these toxicological endpoints, it just cannot be on the market, and the assessment has to stop. And what we observe is that member states systematically do the full risk assessment, which is much, much more time consuming, which leads to a lot of loss of time. So the Commission's approach is ideological. They want to cut into regulation no matter what, but we really presented Commissioner Dombrovskis' cabinet the fact that we already know how to solve all these delays in the reassessment process. The solutions are there, but there's really clearly a blockade there with the member states who do not want to properly implement the rules. Next slide, please. I think we're back with Pauline. Yes.
Yes, we'll talk about pesticide, but you must not forget that this proposal concerns also biocide regulation, and a big deregulation is also in the pipeline for this product. So for reminder, these products are all products that are used to control unwanted organisms and that are not used for plant protection. These are, for instance, insecticides that are used at home, insect repellent, disinfectant, etc. So there are thousands of products in the market in the EU, and there are a high risk of exposure for general public and in particular for children and pregnant women with these products. And this regulation have many issues, like the pesticide one. The main issue is that almost half of the active substances that are currently on the market have not yet been assessed in the EU. They are still in the market. And this is clearly because of a lack of resources and expertise at member state levels and also at ECHA. And the solution proposed by the Commission is also, like pesticide, a time-unlimited authorization, except for candidate for substitution, like for pesticide. So this is really unacceptable. And clearly, there is a need of more resources for member states and for ECHA instead of this unacceptable proposal. So this was a reminder for not forget biocides, and I will let now the floor to François for the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Pauline. So thanks to Martin and Salome also that has explained in detail all the nasty aspects of this leaked proposal. In fact, it takes place in a specific context because there is not only one omnibus, there are 8 of them. There is another one on chemicals, there is another one on the duties of firms, etc. And all of them are meant to, in fact, deregulate, destroy all the good regulations that were put into place by the EU in the past years. So it's a major step backwards, as Martin said. We go backwards 30 years here with this proposal on pesticides. And they just do that by taking an excuse. The excuse is clearly biocontrol. They say that to accelerate the evaluation and the placing on the market of biocontrol products, they have to simplify all the dispositif, all the rules. But it's just an excuse because, of course, biocontrol is interesting. By the way, it's not a magic solution. It only works if you do proper agronomy, because the biocontrol products are not so effective. And they are less toxic, but also a bit less effective than synthetic chemical products. So it doesn't work well when you don't do a good agronomy, when you don't implement proper integrated pest management. And still they have to be evaluated thoroughly as well. But you can't, promote biocontrol by oversimplifying the evaluation of synthetic pesticides and not assuring the proper level of security for them. So this is totally unacceptable. And as Martin said, there are solutions. They were pointed to in the refit dossier reports and by the European Parliament. And here we learned that they have an alternative solution. It would be quite simple to hire 50 to 100 scientists in all the EU, for all the EU countries, to accelerate the way in which the dossiers are done, expertised, and go through all the process. But they refuse to do that. They just refuse to discuss about it. We had this sort of blockage in the meeting we had last week with the Commission, and they say no way. There is no way to hire 50 experts to do the job, more rapidly, which is absolutely, well, it's a political choice, clearly liberal, right wing, maybe even more than that, not to assure the safety of the environment and the health of all the European population by hiring 50 scientists. Instead of that, they choose to suppress systematic reevaluation of all the dossiers for the pesticides. And in doing so, they disregard the latest science examining the latest science was a real progress thanks to the regulation of 2009, but they want, in fact, to more or less drop that. So this is clearly a denial of science and a denial of the priority given to health and the environment that is in the core of the regulation, the pesticide regulation. So it's a major step backwards, and as such is clearly unacceptable. So now I think it's time for Q&As in both languages, and then we will have breakout rooms for French speakers and English speakers.
Yeah, just one point, as you can see here on this last slide, as EU scientists are gathering to send also a strong message to the Commission. You have a link there to the scientific statement, and it will be also broadened. And also, I think, François, in France, there were also quite a few scientists active.
Yes, there are more than 2,000 scientists and health workers have sent already signed a letter to the French Prime Minister in sign of protest against this proposal of the Commission.